Goslings in print on the first thing they see. Which would be you?
You're his mother now.
I do not have the programming.
No one does.
Lupita, welcome to the Awards Tour podcast, and
Thank you.
Congratulations on The Wild Robot. This is just such an incredible animation. I kind of have to ask you, what brought you to this story? Because I know that it's not new for you to do voice acting, but this is really, I think, the first really grand animation that you've done in this world.
Yeah, I mean, they approached me to play Roz, and I read the source material, which is Peter Brown's book by the same name, and I was really impressed by it and inspired. It moved me. I don't like to read, but I couldn't put it down, you know? And it's a very classic story. I thought maybe it was like a lost classic from like the 20s, and then I found out it came out in 2016, and I was like, wow.
Yeah.
It's so hard to tell a story that feels timeless and futuristic at the same time. And it achieves that. And at the heart of it is a beautiful message about the power of kindness, which I think is just a wonderful thing to meditate on at any point.
Yeah, it does feel like a movie we need right now.
Yeah.
With the lessons it's trying to teach us, we need to definitely learn. I think another interesting aspect of this is, you know, between Star Wars and some of the other, like, you know, with the Jungle Book, you've done mocap. What would you say was the hardest challenge with this one? Because it's not like you had an expressive anthropomorphized avatar. You had a robotic face.
Well, yeah.
So your voice had to have, I think, even more to it to get the expressiveness. Like, how did you work all of that out?
Well, yeah, that was a limitation. And then Roz is a robot, and robots don't feel.
Yeah.
And so I was really adamant about making sure that we're not falling into the easy trap of just like emoting. And that's what I do as an actor. That's my job, to emote. So it started off as an intellectual question, like, how am I going to portray this character in a way that is compelling, but doesn't fall into this betrayal of her circumstances. And what we kind of determined is that what Roz's strength is that she adapts and she mimics. And so through the power of mimicry, she takes on characteristics from the animals that she meets. So she starts off with a very kind of programmed, optimistic voice, quite two-dimensional, and that's her factory settings. And then subtly, as she grows and adapts to this environment, she takes on these new textures in her voice, and finally, there's a more well-rounded, three-dimensional sound that is closer to my own sound.
And I think that's something that you definitely had to maybe map out with Chris,
Oh, yes.
too. So how did you all, because I'm sure you went back for multiple sessions. At some points, they're adding in other characters that get cast. How did you sort of gauge those temperature rises that you put into the story as far as when she got, again, I hate to say it, but as her humanity started to radiate more through her voice?
Yeah, it was definitely a work in progress for the 2.5 years that I worked on it. I tried, first of all, when we started, I came with so many ideas of what Roz could sound like. So we definitely started with an extreme, and that informed kind of the script development. So the script was developing as Roz's voice developed too. And then it was really, really about technically mapping with the story beats where her voice would change and making sure that it was just a gradual dial-up. And we had like three main, tentpole sounds, where the super robotic and then the superhuman and then the transition in the middle. And yeah, we would just work on it with those kinds of points in mind. And I had the vocal post. I worked with the vocal coach, and we made sure that we could identify the changes that were necessary for each stage.
I love that this is happening this year because let's just say, 2024 has been already a great year for you with The Quiet Place and your incredible portrayal in that one. I actually watched it again. I watched the ending again because that's a fire ending, as you know,
right?
of that movie. But for you, what has this year been like? Because I think those are two very different roles, but that kind of encompasses what you've done to this point. Like both of those movies, I think, sort of, and what you're about to do later this year with the podcast, that's like really, feels like a very Lupita year that way. Like you did all the things that you normally do kind of all together.
It's just blessings on blessings on blessings on blessings. You work hard, and we're doing these things, and the world learns about them when they're kind of finished for us. And it's really great to see my work come to light. Because a lot of these projects, it's a miracle that anything gets made and gets out there. And I feel very, very blessed to have these projects coming out at once, and at least in the same year. It's been a really great change for me. As you know, I've had my trials too, and so it's very nice to have some triumphs as well.
I mean, listen, definitely had some trials, but just looking, as I was preparing for this, looking at your career, I love that you've had a commitment to both these incredible, broad, on-screen portrayals, Quiet Place, Us, obviously, all the stuff that you did with Black Panther, but then you're a really accomplished vocal performer. I was really looking at this, and I was like, she's done mocap, she's done just strictly voice, she's now done animation. Do you think there's something about that you, as an artist, find particularly fulfilling? Because I feel like you're drawn to these performances. Maybe am I wrong, or is
I'm drawn to variation. That's what I'm drawn to, and I'm drawn to rich character. And so the medium may change, but at the end of the day, I'm looking for roles that stretch me, and I also want to be associated with projects that I feel are impactful. And so whether it's animation or podcast or live action, I go where the depth is.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm glad you mentioned the podcast too, because I think from everything that you've done, all of the projects that you've been a part of, you always bring your full self, so that you're always bringing your multifaceted culture. And so I love to hear about this podcast that you're doing that's coming out. First of all, you're pretty busy, so why are you, just giving yourself more work? But what made you say that this is something that you really wanted to do?
First of all, I had the idea. I've always wanted to do a podcast and for it to feature African story. When I first moved to this country, I was introduced to This American Life pretty early on. And when I was experiencing a lot of culture shock, every week I could hear a story about one American, in just an ordinary person going through something extraordinary or peculiar, and it made me feel more at home in this country. And I remember thinking just like, golly, it would be so nice to have that for the African experience. And I've been homesick, and I thought, telling African stories is one way to feel closer to home. And I believe that the African experience is a global experience. So I wanted to reach out to other Africans who are having that sort of hybrid experience of the world, who can call more than one place, more than one state home. And so that's what this podcast is about. It's called Mind Your Own, and it's storytelling. It's a storytelling show all from the African perspective, and it's coming out September 19th. I'm very proud of it.
If people time it out right, they can go see Wild Robot and listen to that on the way home. They can time it out just like that.
Right.
I want to talk a little bit more about what you were able to do with Roz, because it was such a vivid performance. And again, looking at the image behind you, the fact that you were able to do that with basically lights and colors is kind of interesting. But I'm curious, when you do vocal performances, you have to go back a lot to dial things down. What was the one that y'all had to keep revisiting that was maybe it took a few times before you found exactly what it was, as far as what you wanted out of that moment? Because I know sometimes it starts here. Which was the one that you guys kept having to sort of dial in to get it right?
What it was figuring out how Roz's voice changes. The script was evolving as well as the voice, like I said. And so there was some versions of the script where it was an event in the movie where Roz went from one voice to another. And it always felt kind of clunky, and it was not right. So every time I'd go in, that transition was shifting. So it wasn't really a moment. It was more a state of being that needed to be massaged. And in the end, what I witnessed in the final product is that the evolution of Roz in her voice is subtle, and you only really realize how far she's come when you meet other robots like her, and then you have the contrast from where she begun and where she is. But really, there's no longer that event. It's just as she grows on this island, her voice slowly changes, which is so true about the human experience, and it's very true about my own voice, to be honest.
Yeah, we don't notice the changes that are happening with us. The other thing I definitely wanted to ask you about with this one is your vocal performance partners. I know normally with animation you may have nothing, but I think maybe towards the latter half you started. So whose voice first came in, did you first be able to maybe hear who you were going to do? Because I know like Pedro was cast pretty late, but like, did you get to do any of your voice acting with kids or nobody's?
Nobody. My only scene partner was Chris Saunders.
Gosh,
but the
wow.
thing about it is that Chris Saunders is one hell of a performer. So he really brought his everything. He was fantastic at playing absolutely every character.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So I love this. So I think the other folks got your stuff. They were able to sort of like guide off of a little bit. But I love that you got, well, who was your favorite character for him to play then?
Oh, gosh. I loved it when he played... Oh, he was so good at all of them. I couldn't choose.
You couldn't choose?
He's so funny too.
Okay.
So he just brought it every time. I loved his Fink. I loved his, what's the possum's name? I forget.
Oh yeah, I forget. But she was mom, basically.
He was great as his Bright Bill. Honestly, I couldn't choose. I was just elated every time he switched it up.
Well, that brings me to the next question. I was going to ask you about him because with animated directors, the direction has to be sometimes so specific, like in their ability to communicate with actors what they're trying to achieve, when sometimes you might not even have a storyboard of what you're trying to do. What was a particular piece of direction that he gave you that you found to be really, I don't know, just like a perfect bit to tell you in that moment with Roz that you were just like, wow, it completely gave it to you so quickly?
I can't tell you of a moment. I'll just tell you of his approach to directing. Chris has a way of sparking your own creative motor. So he gives you descriptive notes. He gives you active notes. He doesn't tell you what to do. He doesn't give you line readings. He inspires a new thought in the way he gives you a note. And I'm sorry, I can't think of anything other than like active. So he's like, can you do that more sleepy?
Yeah.
That's so helpful, and then you're like, oh, okay, got it. Or, that sort of thing. And I love that because he wasn't like a puppet master making you do what he needed. He was just infusing a new thought in you, and then it would open up a whole new portal of my head, and I'll be like, oh, I have another idea. And that's what was so lovely about working with him.
I know that you've done more than a few horrors, and if I have this correct, your parents are not the biggest horror fans, or less loving.
They like them less.
They like them less. So were they there? What did they think of this? Have they seen it? Because I feel
this
like
movie.
Yes.
Oh, they haven't seen it yet.
They haven't seen it yet. Okay, because I was just about to say, because I feel like this would be. Like, did you tell them at least be like, this one's for you? Like, it's not, it's going to be a family film.
My mom knows it's drawn. She's like, I'm in.
Okay, she's like, let's do it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, it does have a lot of things that the film talks about as far as family and parents and making it up. And although, it's going to be a cute family movie, and for kids, it'll just play on one level. But for those older folks that are going to get to watch it, what's something that you hope they take away from this one? Because it is subtle, I think, some of the messages that you get from Roz and Bright Bill's story, but they're very universal. And I do think it's something that's like at the heart of like when you watch this film.
Well, I hope they feel validated. I think this is a real film that is like celebrating the role of parenting, and giving it its flowers, And Roz is uniquely, she's a parental figure, but she's a blank slate when she begins. She's completely naive, and because she's a robot, we allow for that. But what we really ought to recognize is that parents are doing it for the first time too. They're parents for the first time, and there's a learning curve that has to occur on the job, just like Roz. So I hope that they feel validated by that. The film also has a lot of like dark humor where like parents get to say things they're not allowed to say. So I hope they feel validated there as well.
No, I definitely love that one. In fact, one of my favorite lines is when she's talking to the possum mom, Catherine O'Hara's character. Yeah. And she's like, I had a kid. Like, she's just like, this is what has happened to me. This is why I don't recognize myself anymore. And I was like, that is so real.
Right.
Another thing I also kind of wanted to talk to you a little bit about is you've done already, I think, so much. What have you not gotten to tackle as an artist in this space that you're hoping to do, whether it be a genre or working with a particular filmmaker? I do feel like you're always maybe looking towards for that next great project that, like, to this point intrigues you.
I really want to be in an all-out comedy.
You haven't really?
Yeah, I've done one. I did one, Little Monsters.
That's right, the horror movie.
Yes, the zombie romantic comedy, and that was a lot of fun. But I want more of that. I think there's so, first of all, comedies it's great to give people reason to just laugh and enjoy themselves. After all, this is entertainment. So I got to be pretty funny in this, which was nice. And
you did. You were very funny.
Thank you very much. Shout out to Chris Saunders, who
yes,
brings that in. But yeah, I want to be in live action comedy.
No, a live action comedy. Yeah, let's make this happen. Let's definitely do it. And then looking back on your career to this point, as I was getting ready for this, I was like looking at how varied it is and how many different filmmakers and projects you've gotten to work on. Looking back to this point, what's been the most informative one for you that you sort of look back to as like, wow, this was either a watershed moment in my career or one where I really learned something, or one that, obviously Black Panther holds a very special place in your heart, but is that the one?
I mean, I've been very fortunate to have a few of those. Everything started with 12 Years a Slave, and that was one hell of a watershed moment.
Yeah.
And the one that has made all the rest possible. And then I've had a lot of projects that I feel have helped me grow in a singular way, and that's sort of what governs what I choose next, because I'm lending my life force to another person's life, imagined or not. And so I don't get that time back. I want to learn something myself. So I try and take on roles with something that I'm curious enough about that will help me grow as a person, as well as help me grow as an artist.
Well, I'm down for it wherever you go next. Thank you so much, Lupita. Thank you for chatting with us about Wild Robot and your incredible podcast. And we will definitely be seeing you on the awards tour.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.